The research dome was built with both respect and misunderstanding. It sat in a cleared field near an Appalachian forest, a hidden alien outpost created by the Chirellan Exchange, a group of alien scientists from many species who came to study Earth's life forms. To them, Earth was like a living museum, old-fashioned but beautiful. The dome shimmered faintly in the morning light, nearly invisible to humans, hidden by special light-bending technology. In pride, there were 12 students in this class. 11 were Chirellans, born on the space station above Earth and raised in sterile learning pods filled with facts and diagrams. The 12th was a human named Nathan Reynolds, a nature expert brought in at Earth's request. He wore flannel shirts, drank black coffee, and had a bad feeling about all of this. "They're just bugs," said Renix, the youngest and loudest student. His thin arms stuck out from a pale blue shell, and his crest twitched as he spoke. "Your species gets emotional over buzzing protein lumps?" Nathan stood nearby in the grass, arms crossed, watching bees float lazily around a patch of thistles. "They're not just protein lumps," he said. "They're a keystone species. Pollinators. Without them, half the plants you study wouldn't survive." "And yet," Rennick said with fake wonder, "they sting once." "They do," Nathan nodded. "And then they die. That alone should make you think. It makes me wonder why they'd even bother." The other students laughed, their chirping voices blending together through their vocal tech. Nathan ignored them. He crouched near a patch of clover and watched a honeybee hover, land, and disappear into a flower. Then he pointed toward a quiet grove just 20 feet away. "There's a wild hive in that copse, western honeybees, Apis mellifera, native to Europe but common here, self-managed, coordinated. You want to understand Earth ecology, start there." Renix made a show of adjusting his ocular membrane. "Primitive eusocial hierarchy, no central brain, no command structure. This is biology by chaos. Stable function as a unit," Nathan said. "No queen orders them around. She's just the reproductive organ." "And yet they operate without centralized instruction?" sneered another student, Yekol. "Yeah, it's called swarm intelligence. You'd be amazed what it can do." Later that day, the students began scanning the hive. Drones floated near the trunk of a gnarled oak, mapping heat patterns and forager traffic. The bees ignored the humming devices, focused entirely on their task. A few bounced off the scanners, irritated but not aggressive. Nathan watched from the edge, hands in his coat pockets. "Don't crowd the entrance, they'll get defensive." "They do not even detect us," said Renix. "Lay beneath the thick layers of urine picking up at the entrance of the delta. They're choosing not to act. There's a difference." The next day, Renix took it further. He returned to the grove with a field manipulator, a long, articulated probe designed for light biological interaction. He extended it toward the hive entrance and nudged the lower comb. The response was immediate. 10 bees rocketed out, spiraling toward the motion. They didn't sting, yet, but they tracked the manipulator until it retreated. Renix chittered with amusement. That was their defense? A few warning scouts? "They saw a threat," Nathan said, walking up behind him. "They sent an appropriate response." So emotionally inefficient. Why sacrifice your life for a warning? "You didn't touch the hive directly," Nathan said. "You touched a part of the outer comb. Try poking the brood chamber. See what happens." Rennick tilted his head. "You dare me?" "I'm advising you not to. But go ahead." The challenge was accepted with the kind of smug curiosity only alien intellects could produce. Renix adjusted the manipulator, narrowed the tip, and inserted it halfway up the comb wall. This time, it sank into a brood cell, and all hell broke loose. The hive erupted, not in panic, but in fury. Within seconds, a swirling storm of bees poured out of the trunk, dozens, then hundreds, black and gold streaks diving as one. They moved not in confusion, but in a dense, spiraling tornado of motion. Rennick stepped back, too late. The bees ignored the manipulator and went straight for his torso, his limbs, his exposed joints. Stingers embedded into soft tissue, venom pumped in bursts. Rennick screamed. an eerie, mechanical squeal that made every Chirellan within hearing range jolt in alarm. Nathan rushed forward, grabbing Renix by one arm and yanking him backward, away from the hive. "Stop flailing! Drop your field pack! You're attracting them with the EM frequency." Renix thrashed. Bees clung to his face shield, his ocular crest swelled visibly. Nathan dragged him into the nearby stream and shoved him down, submerging the top half of his body. By the time the swarm relented, Renix had been stung more than 50 times. They brought him into the dome's medical wing, his carapace swelling in irregular patches. Internal temperature fluctuated. He began spasming within an hour. His species was not allergic to the venom but had no tolerance for the histamine flood. It took the medical team 10 hours to stabilize him. Nathan sat by the isolation tank, arms crossed, watching the hissing diagnostic feed scroll. A few Chirellans gathered near the observation deck, quieter than usual. Yekol spoke first. "He nearly expired." "Yep," Nathan said. "They gave a warning." He didn't listen. They'd be coordinated, without signal. Exactly. Later that night, Nathan returned to the grove. The hive had sealed the damaged comb. No bees attacked. They simply rebuilt. Quiet, organized, untouchable in their unity. Nathan exhaled slowly, then turned to the shadows behind him. "You done laughing yet?" No one answered. Because they weren't laughing anymore. They were studying. And, maybe for the first time, understanding what nature looked like when it didn't need technology to defend itself. Renix spent the next 3 days in a suspended recovery pod, his limbs immobilized while his system processed the venomous shock. His left arm remained swollen, the flexible dermal plates discolored and rigid. The medical team had drained localized histamine buildups and administered corticosteroid analogs, but the pain lingered. Chirellans weren't built to understand pain the way humans were. Their neural lattice interpreted it more like signal interference, a functional anomaly rather than a personal sensation. But Renix didn't speak for hours after stabilization. The message had gotten through. The remaining students kept their distance from the hive, but not from their curiosity. Something had shifted. They no longer viewed the bees as primitive or chaotic. Now they viewed them the way prey animals viewed tall grass. Something that might be watching, waiting, and organized beyond understanding. Nathan began holding daily sessions near the observation window. "You saw a hive response," he said to the group. "You triggered an alarm pheromone. You were marked. That's why they ignored the probe and went for Renix." "But there was no signal," said Yekol. "No verbal command. No chemical broadcast we could detect." "There was a chemical signal," Nathan corrected. "It just wasn't one your instruments were tuned for. Bees communicate in layers, scent, vibration, orientation. When you pierced the brood chamber, one of the nurse bees released an isopentyl alarm pheromone. It spreads fast. Every bee within range locks onto it. And they attacked him as one." Nathan nodded. "Because they don't have to agree. They don't debate, they respond. It's not a democracy, it's a decision tree with thousands of legs." The concept disturbed them. In the following days, the Chirellans observed the hive from a greater distance. Drones recorded flight patterns. Spectrographic data tracked the movement of pollen-laden foragers. They marveled at how no single bee seemed to know the whole picture, but every one of them somehow acted in perfect sync. On the 5th day, one of the students, Searle, asked, "If the queen does not command, what prevents internal rebellion?" Nathan gave a wry smile. "What rebellion? They're all born to serve the hive. Even the queen. She doesn't rule. She lays eggs. If she gets weak or lays poorly, the workers raise a new one." "You allow them so much autonomy," said another. "They kill their own queen?" "Not kill, replace, no ceremony, no protest, just adaptation." The lesson deepened. The more they watched, the less they understood. The more they tried to model the hive using Virelian logic algorithms, the more the models broke down. One day, while the group observed from a hill overlooking the forest, a human park ranger named Marcus Keller arrived on a quad bike. Mid-50s, ex-Army, known for his square jaw and sunburned forearms. He stopped at the dome perimeter, waved through the optical field, and waited. Nathan walked out to meet him. "Marcus, something up?" "Got a report of a high drone cluster along the northern ridge. Aggressive behavior. You seen anything unusual?" "Not unusual for bees. One of the students messed with a hive, learned the hard way." Marcus frowned. "How bad?" "Dozens of stings. He'll live." "Glad to hear it. Just make sure no one tries to smoke them out or relocate the colony. Those aren't backyard pets. They've been in that grove for years. I'll make sure they keep their distance." Marcus nodded, then leaned in slightly. "You know they're not just defending territory, right?" Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "They remember scent, face, movement patterns. I've seen them go after the same dog 3 days in a row. Same boots, same hat." Nathan's face turned serious. "You think they marked Renix? Wouldn't be the first time a hive held a grudge." That evening, the medical pod sealed itself again. Renix had insisted on walking. His limbs shook. The swelling had gone down, but sensitivity remained in every joint. He entered the main observation deck silently, looked down at the hive through the glass, and said, "They anticipated me." Nathan nodded. Renix continued, voice low. "They did not scatter. They did not panic. They did not sacrifice at random. They organized." "They may always organize," Nathan said. "You just finally saw it. I mocked them." "Yeah, and they humbled you." Renix turned, eyes dull but alert. "I want to understand." The next morning, Renix joined Nathan in the field. No drones, no probes, just a notepad and a wide-brimmed hat Nathan had insisted he wear. They sat 20 yards from the hive and watched. A worker bee landed on a nearby rock, legs thick with orange pollen. Another followed it, doing a tight figure-8 dance. Renix stiffened. "She is? Broadcasting location?" "Yep, waggle dance. It tells others the direction and distance of food. The angle to the sun. It's basic trigonometry, encoded in a wiggle." Renix stared, then jotted notes furiously. From the edge of the hill, the other students began to trickle in, not as skeptics, but as observers. Some of them still flinched when a bee buzzed close, but no one laughed anymore. Later that week, Nathan gave a lecture about defensive perimeter behavior. He explained how bees assign guards to the hive entrance, how they change roles, how undertaker bees remove dead, how cooling bees bring water to regulate temperature. "They are not individually brilliant," he said, "but they don't need to be. Collectively, they outthink most predators." Yukol raised a hand. "Would they act the same if the threat was widespread?" "Widespread?" "If, for example, several intrusions occurred simultaneously across their territory?" Nathan considered it. "They would respond locally, but the hive doesn't panic. If one flank is compromised, they adapt. Pull foragers, reinforce defenders. The decision doesn't come from a top-down order. It's algorithmic, distributed cognition. And if the threat escalates?" Nathan's face hardened. "Then they escalate." Renix leaned forward. "They are not just defenders. They are strategists." "Exactly." By the end of the second week, the Corellan students had stopped referring to bees as insects. They called them units, defenders, coordinated biological networks. Renix had written a 30-page report outlining emergent threat assessment behavior in colony insects, with the hive as a central case study. He ended the paper with a single sentence. "Underestimating Earth's bees is not only dangerous, it is profoundly foolish." No one disputed it. The laughing had stopped. But the learning had only begun. By the third week, what had started as a zoological curiosity had evolved into a controlled experiment, one that would soon spiral far beyond the dome's intent. The Corellan students were no longer mocking the bees. Now they were mapping them. They built a low EM observation array around the grove's perimeter, careful not to interfere with the flight paths. Even Renix, still nursing the residual sting in his shoulder, took meticulous notes. Nathan kept his distance, splitting time between reviewing their data and walking the woods. He sensed something tightening around the grove. Not from the students, from the bees. Their foraging patterns had changed. They were clustering nearer the hive, cutting back on perimeter exploration, a sign of internal stress, not fear, readiness, as if the hive itself had started watching back. On the 24th day, a minor storm rolled in from the west. Not a violent one, just enough to soak the ground and drop the temperature. Nathan used the time to review infrared motion scans. One camera, stationed on a maple tree northeast of the hive, showed an unusual shift. Around the secondary branch clusters, he muttered to himself, eyes narrowed. Why reinforce outer limbs? By midday, the storm had passed. Renix requested a live demonstration of adaptive hive behavior under pressure. He didn't want to provoke another attack, just stimulate a non-invasive response, something to measure traffic shifts and defensive rotations. Nathan hesitated. You sure about this? He asked. I have calibrated the stimulus device to remain 2 meters from the hive, Renix said. No contact, no pheromone triggers, low-frequency sonic pulses only. Nathan ran a hand through his beard. 2 meters is still close. Too close. If they're stressed, the risk is minimal. You said that last time, and I had to dunk you in a stream. Renix tilted his head. There will be no contact this time. I have adjusted the output. The test began at 11:04 local time. The sonic emitter, perched on a tri-leg base, pulsed a faint vibrational frequency mimicking the wingbeat signature of an unfamiliar insect. It wasn't aggressive, just foreign. Within 30 seconds, the outermost guards appeared. They didn't dive. They didn't swarm. They hovered. 30, then 60. Renix tracked their behavior. They didn't retreat. They didn't probe. They held a perfect outer circle. The emitter registered low-frequency wing beats, rising in volume from the hive's entrance. At 11:06, Nathan swore and stood up. Of the staging, what? They're forming a layered defense, not a swarm, a net. Renix's crest stiffened. That is not standard bee behavior. No, Nathan said, grabbing his comm, because this isn't a standard hive anymore. At 11:08, a shadow passed overhead. It wasn't clouds. It was bees. Thousands of them. Not wild, flailing defenders. A unified spiral cloud, tightening in coils, descending not on the emitter but the equipment behind it, specifically the drone clusters used for earlier scans. 2 of them were still active, pulling data. The bees engulfed them. The sonic emitter wasn't the threat. The surveillance was? Shut down the signal, Nathan yelled. Nicole fumbled with the remote interface. One drone powered down, the other flickered. At 11:10, the swarm shifted again. 2 groups split from the main cloud and swept toward the students. They're flanking, Nathan shouted. Move! The team scattered. Soral tripped on a tree root and was lifted by Yuckle mid-fall. Renix vaulted over the signal mount and ducked behind a fallen log, swatting only when the bees closed the gap. One made contact, right shoulder. Another hit his wrist, a third embedded into the side of his neck. This time, he didn't scream. He just gritted his teeth and pressed a field wrap against the skin. Nathan hit his comm. Medical team to Grove Sector 6. Bring epinephrine injectors and thermal sealants. The swarm pulled back at 11:14, just as suddenly as it had begun. When the field was clear, the wreckage was evident. Both drones were non-functional. The emitter mount had been torn loose and tossed 3 meters by the impact wave of sheer kinetic mass. And Renix, alive but pale, had taken 3 hits in less than 4 minutes. The medical team arrived with stretchers. Renix declined one. I can walk, he said through clenched jaws. You took stings near vascular nodes, the medic warned. You're still building antibodies. That reaction could spike fast. I will monitor. I want to debrief first. Back at the dome, Nathan sat across from him. They didn't respond to threat, he said. They responded to surveillance. Renix winced. They interpreted intrusion as anticipation of attack. They saw you watching, Nathan said, and they adapted. Yekel entered carrying a datapad. We ran the flight vector data. It's not random. The bees weren't reacting to the signal. They were forming a counter-surveillance pattern. Nathan blinked. You're telling me they weren't just defending the hive? They were defending the entire area, preemptively. They beneath the thick layers of ice. Yekel's mandibles pressed tight against her faceplate. They outflanked us. Later that evening, Nathan walked the grove alone. No drones, no electronics, just a handheld analog field notepad and a pen. The bees didn't attack. They didn't even fly close. They watched. From the hive entrance, dozens of tiny black eyes stared. Nathan scribbled a note. Not defenders, not primitives, not predictable. He looked up again. They are planning. The official report submitted to the Karelin Exchange 2 days later read like a war log. It contained full documentation, high-frequency audio, electromagnetic interference logs, sting response timelines, and synchronized aerial patterns recorded just before the final dispersal. The words emergent behavior appeared 12 times. The term tactical adaptation appeared 5. Renix wrote the final paragraph himself, one hand in a soft cast to reduce strain-induced swelling from the venom. The hive is not a creature, it is a doctrine. It operates through decentralized cognition, but its will is singular. The illusion of disarray hides an evolutionary weapon forged by hardship and repetition. Their language is movement. Their strategy is sacrifice. Their motive is survival. They are not insects. They are an idea made of thousands. The Exchange commended the report. They added it to their academic archives. But none of the students went near the grove again. By the 4th week, the dome returned to routine. Experiments resumed. Drones were recalibrated to avoid high-interference fauna. Most of the Karelin cohort shifted their attention to fungal networks in the deeper forest, something that didn't sting, chase, or remember. Nathan stayed behind. He visited the grove alone now, always on foot, always without electronics. He brought a thermos of tea and a small folding chair. He sat on the edge of the clearing, careful not to cross the invisible line the bees had drawn for themselves. He watched them go about their cycles, collecting, cleaning, repairing, guarding. He noticed something subtle. When the hive was threatened, the forager count dropped drastically. But now, after weeks of observation and near attack, the numbers had returned to full strength. More bees than ever gathered nectar. They were rebuilding, not recovering, thriving. Renix joined him one morning. He walked with effort, his leg brace still stiff from residual inflammation, but he managed the short hike from the dome. Nathan handed him a mug of tea. Didn't think I'd see you back here. I didn't think I'd want to. Renix sat beside him, staring at the hive. You know, Nathan said, it's not just the venom that scares people. It's the discipline. We're used to danger having some kind of selfishness to it. A predator wants to eat, a virus wants to spread. But bees? They're different. They'll die just to protect an idea. Renix's crest flickered once, slowly. Do you consider that noble? Nathan shrugged. I consider it terrifying. And beautiful. A soft breeze passed through the grove. Bees circled overhead, indifferent to the 2 silent men watching them. Their hum was neither threatening nor relaxed. It simply was. I ran the numbers again, Renix said, about the attack formation. What did you find? There were 4 distinct clusters during the response. 1 hit the signal source, 1 went for our scanning drones, 1 intercepted Yekel and Soral, and the 4th came for me. Nathan nodded. Because they remembered you. Yes, they remembered. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. They teach us to think in systems, Rennick said, but we underestimate systems that don't care about recognition. No leaders, no names, just duty. That's where you went wrong, Nathan said. You looked for intelligence in individuals, but the hive isn't about individuals. It's about convergence. Rennick stood slowly, adjusting the brace on his leg. I used to think sacrifice was weakness, and now I think it might be strength in its purest form. That afternoon, Nathan visited Marcus Keller at the ranger station to update him. How's your little science crew doing? Marcus asked, flipping through weather logs. Quieter, wiser. No more probes. You figure out what made the bees so organized? Nathan scratched the back of his neck. It wasn't one thing. It was everything. Pressure, environment, time. The hive isn't a reaction, it's a memory. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You think they evolved that way on purpose? No, but they learned, and that might be worse. Marcus laughed. Guess that's one way to stay alive. Never forget who kicked your door. When Nathan returned to the dome, he found a message waiting for him. The exchange had offered him a new position, lead ecological liaison for another Earth-based station, deeper forest, denser biome, fewer students, more risk. He read the offer, then looked out the window. The bees were still flying, still working, still together. He closed the message. He wasn't ready to leave. The next morning, Rennick and two of the younger students held a discussion about nonverbal communication across non-sapient species. The bees featured prominently, so did fire ants, termites, even coral networks. But the bees now had become a cornerstone. At the end of the discussion, Rennick addressed the group. When I first encountered this hive, he said, I saw disorder. Now I see discipline, not imposed but chosen. They respond not to authority but to necessity, each action a thread. The hive is the weave. He stepped back, and when you try to tear it, it tightens. No one laughed. No one interrupted. They all remembered what it had cost him to learn. And outside the dome, in the shade of the old grove, the bees moved like a single breath, silent, tireless, and utterly unstoppable.